All right. Hello, everybody. Caleb Nelson with Sifted here. Welcome back to another episode of our LinkedIn Live series. This is a series by which we kind of dissect what's happening in parcel, last and final mile delivery, some of the challenges that are taking place with both FedEx and UPS, regional carriers, and how shippers just like you can stay on top of and reduce their costs by staying on top of their data. Today, I am super happy. I've got Jeremy Lee, who's our Vice President of Business Solutions, to join me. Hey, Jeremy, how are you?
I'm doing well. Excited to be here. Excited to partake in an exciting topic that's in the industry right now.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I've spent time. I've worked with you for the last number of years, and you're a pretty humble guy. To introduce Jeremy, I'll do it in a way that you probably won't do it because I know you and I've worked with you for so long. For those of you who are listening and need to better understand those individuals that tend to join us on these LinkedIn Live series, we try and find and source really top-notch individuals that really know exactly what they're talking about and have been in the industry for a really long time. Jeremy Lee, there's not a lot of Jeremy Lees in the United States, not by just name only, but by experience.
Definitely not by name only.
But by experience, Jeremy's one of those individuals that has been in transportation and consulting services for what, 15 years now?
Gosh, at least, yeah. I'm starting to show my age at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I know 7 years with Sifted, and before that, I think you've got a degree in microbiology.
Yeah, molecular and microbiology, and worked in supply chain operations prior to joining Sifted.
But it's pretty unreal, and I think it's we're kind of in for a treat today because what we're going to be talking about is really cold chain and making sure that packages that are extremely sensitive, either both perishable or sensitive in terms of its material or contents, arrive at the destination usable in one piece and fresh. I think you're in KC. How hot is it today?
We're going to top out at 91 on the thermometer, but I think the real feel is probably going to be closer to like 99 degrees, and it's 11 o'clock Central Time, and it's already 85. So
yeah,
it's pretty warm
with what feels like 300% humidity. Last time I was out there,
at least.
Out here in Salt Lake, it's a dry heat, but we're going to top over 100 degrees today. It's one of those things that cold chain isn't often discussed and talked about every part of the year. Although you do have a number of companies out there that are probably watching right now that it is shipping it at a proper temperature is important throughout the entirety of the year. But just kind of like where peak season really hits Q4, cold chain really hits in the summer months. And when you've got packages that are sitting out there for multiple days in either a hot van or an non-conditioned air-conditioned warehouse, and the temperatures are reaching past 100 degrees, those boxes and shipments are literally cooking in those warehouses. I'm curious, based upon your experience and whatnot, what trends are you seeing when it comes to cold chain shipping right now, Jeremy? What are you typically seeing?
So, one of the biggest things that shippers really need to focus on when you're starting to consider cold chain is your total landed cost. When you're moving a package, there's a lot that goes into it. So you're going to be looking at the package weight and the distance traveled. When you're moving something that needs to be temperature regulated, there's more that goes into it than just the distance traveled and the weight of the package. You have to consider the environment that it's going to be traveling through. And what that container is rated in order to keep that environment sustained, and what needs to go into that container in order to sustain that packaging costs. There's just so much more that goes into it, and whether you're dealing with foods, or biopsies, or samples, uh, the severity of failure could be quite dramatic.
Yeah, I was really curious on what industries typically utilize cold chain. You mentioned food. You mentioned we've got a lot of customers that deal with perishable goods. What
Mhm.
other industries are really kind of utilizing cold chain, or where it becomes really important?
So one of the biggest ones probably on everybody's mind right now is pharmaceuticals.
Hmm.
Coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, cold chain was at the top of the everybody's mind on getting the vaccines that had to stay in sub 30-degree temperatures in order to stay viable. So
Yeah.
you've got pharmaceuticals, you've got foodstuffs. Um, it really starts to run the gamut. Anything that really just needs to maintain or cannot be exposed to varying environments needs to maintain inside of there.
Yeah, and we were talking before the show, but nobody wants. What did you say? Nobody wants a bad vaccine, or a nobody wants to get jabbed by something where it's been spoiled.
Well, you definitely don't want a bad vaccine, and you most certainly, if you had to go through a biopsy procedure, you certainly don't want to have to go through it again because your sample didn't make it to the testing lab. Your biggest focus is on the results, and hopefully positive results. But yeah, if that sample that's been taken, it suddenly spoils, and then you have to go back to the doctor and have another procedure and everything, that's time and discomfort that you have to go through.
Yeah, I'm also. I mean, the whole medical side is really interesting. If you look at, it's oftentimes investors and individuals that are kind of outside looking at FedEx and UPS. They often consider FedEx and UPS just e-commerce delivery carriers,
Mhm.
but they are kind of at the backbone of moving a lot of extremely critical, time sensitive, and important items throughout the United States that the country runs on. Medical being, I would say, top of that list. Pharmaceuticals as kind of a subcategory in the medical space. We saw, I think, from COVID and a lot of the supply chain issues, how fragile that whole system actually is. And I think it's really important when you're talking about hotter and hotter summers and it's past 100 degrees, how you protect a particular sensitive item from being damaged or spoiled. One other thing that I thought was really kind of interesting is you also have companies that ship highly sensitive electronics that might
Mhm.
not be able to exceed past a specific temperature, and they're part of the group too. So I think oftentimes it's thought of like, well, if I'm a chocolate shop and I'm shipping nationwide, yeah, that's going to be pretty important to me. But I think it oftentimes gets overlooked that there is a whole subcategory of individual shippers out there that take advantage of or need to take advantage of um, cold chain shipping solutions for sure.
Absolutely.
One thing that's kind of interesting when we look at data, Sifted is really at our core, we're a data company. When you look at a single individual shipment, and if you were to put that single individual shipment in Excel, you're looking at 60 columns and up to potentially 7 rows for one individual shipment. So it's a massive, massive amount of data. You mentioned some of the data points that you would recommend for cold chain shippers to really look towards to help manage those costs. Can you dive into that a little bit further? What specifically would you say, hey, look, if I'm a cold chain shipper, what specifically do I need to be looking at in the data to help me manage my uh, cold chain supply a little bit easier?
Sure. So, the first thing that we talked about is, what is the weight and everything that goes into the packaging? One of the bigger things to focus on is going to be your time in transit, and actually the route by which your packages are taking to reach your shipper or your customers, I should say. Um, oftentimes we see, somebody shipping from, like, say, California, and they're saying, hey, this package is going to go to Arizona. It's only X amount of distance. It should take X amount of time. But the carriers have a hub and spoke network that
Hmm.
they run these packages through. And those hubs, uh, they're varying in sizes. So, you've got end of the line hubs that are collecting packages, and then they start consolidating them into bigger hubs, and then they all get broken out and sent to their end use again. So you might see that package that you thought was going to go from San Diego to Arizona and only have to, travel X distance, but it actually might have traveled to Indianapolis
Yeah.
and then down to Texas and then all the way back to Arizona. And if you're only planning for a certain amount of travel, but your package is getting routed in a different way, and that could be for a number of factors. The COVID-19 impact has impacted supply chain more dramatically than just capacity. You're looking at staffing issues. So when you're looking at, where a package might get routed to, it might get routed to a location that can actually handle the volume and then turn around and bundle it up with other shipments to get it back to its final destination.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that so much. There's so many customers that we talk to that make that assumption, California to Arizona or California to Utah, or New York to Pennsylvania. And if they select it in a 2-day network and expect it to get there within 2 days, you would think it would travel from, California to Utah. I know I order car parts from California all the time. And I watch as it gets tracked. And if they ship it FedEx 2-day, it goes from California, flies all the way across country to Memphis, Tennessee, to their
Yep.
national hub and spoke facilities that you mentioned, is sorted at that major hub and then flown all the way back to Salt Lake City and then out for delivery. You have to take that into a consideration, both from a time in transit, distance traveled, what it's traveling on, as well as if you think of, like, if I'm a cold chain shipper and sustainability is also really important to me. There are some really interesting things that we can get into a little bit later on about sustainability, that when you apply it to that kind of a method of saying, hey, I'm going to use a national carrier and I'm going to think that they're going to move it in a regional way,
Hmm.
you're probably mistaken. And utilizing some regional carriers, I think, is really kind of a cool idea and probably pretty important to look at.
Absolutely. It's going to be absolutely imperative as e-commerce and capacity continues to, or I should say, e-commerce continues to grow, capacity continues to be constrained. You're going to have alternative methods to serve your clients.
It brings me to my next point, which is really on carrier performance. What have you seen from carrier performance issues that shippers are facing right now? I mean, a lot of shippers just use FedEx and UPS for kind of final mile delivery, but when Sifted is going through and tracking as much data as we're tracking and all of those shipments, what are we typically seeing for on-time delivery performance from the carriers, and what should customers expect kind of for the summer?
Um, so we've seen performance below historic average. So what we've historically seen prior to COVID-19 and the pandemic was we typically see performance in the 95 plus percentile, maybe 98
Yeah.
percentile. Generally speaking, the majority of your packages are going to get there within the time that you expected, and your customer experience is going to be on par with that. As the capacity has increased inside of these national carrier networks, what we've started to see is an increased failure rate.
Mm.
It happened very quickly in 2020 when everything shifted to e-commerce, and that was like your primary lifeline to the rest of the world was through the carriers. Um, but they've struggled to adjust and address some of these capacity issues and try to get back to it. And that goes back to my previous point of how shipments are getting routed. It comes down to they're trying to work around some of the shortfalls that they have inside of their own network,
Yeah.
and move these packages as efficiently as possible. But again, if you only have staff that can handle X amount of packages in Salt Lake City where you're at, but I have Y amount of staffing in Indianapolis, if I'm moving shipments and I can actually handle them better over there, then that's what I'm going to have to do. And we actually saw that in the Northwest. over the last year or so, where they've actually had to divert shipments out of Oregon and Washington to Northern California, where they actually had the staffing to handle the flow, but that causes a delay in some of those shipments and where they need to ultimately get to.
Yeah, I think that's really crazy. The statistic I heard from FedEx's own mouth was that at the end of last year, they were rerouting close to 600,000 packages a day of shipments that were supposed to go to one facility and needed to go to multiple other facilities because they didn't have enough employees at their primary facilities in order to be able to manage the sort and seg work. So I think it's really interesting that what you have come to expect from the carriers is no longer what you can expect moving forward, especially when the carrier capacity is tight, meaning the carriers they're looking out their window at their warehouse floor and they can't see it. There's too many boxes and it's just
That's right.
overwhelming. But it's also a labor issue, right? You've got a number of carriers that are understaffed based off of the number of shipments that they're trying to move through the system. And when you put in sensitive shipments on top of that, you're going to have a higher failure rate. So looking at your on-time delivery percentage, tracking that accordingly, having proper conversations with your carrier reps, I think is really important. And
that's right.
Packaging comes in, full force, where you need to give yourself a couple of extra, I would say, a day or two of leeway in how much that product can actually take without spoiling.
That's right. And that's one of the big things that our clients are coming to us and asking for, is that true performance data. There's a lot of exceptions that the carriers have, whether it's weather related or any other number of exceptions that they have, where they can say, hey, this package wasn't delivered on time, but it's not, valid for a money back guarantee because of this exception.
Yeah.
But what these customers need to see is, okay, well, you didn't get it there in 2 days, you got it there in 3 days. And that's fine that I didn't get a money back guarantee. I need to be able to plan for my shipments to cover maybe 3.5 days at that point. So maybe I need to start looking at different coolants that go inside of my packages,
Yep.
or different insulation that goes along with it. Because, I can't necessarily correct the failure rate that's happening, but what I can do is, optimize my shipments to withstand maybe some of those conditions that they're going to end up going through.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. A lot of the conversations have taken place around, hey, I've single sourced all of my shipments with one carrier. Are you seeing kind of a change that's happening right now where customers are now saying, I mean, you're at the forefront, you're talking to clients every single day. Are you seeing where customers are now saying, look, what other options are out there besides single sourcing all with FedEx or UPS? And how important is that in their cold chain?
It's extremely important. With the rise of e-commerce, again, talking about like straining capacity. I've been talking to my clients for the last 7 years about diversification and having multiple options, because you don't want to have all of your eggs in one basket. But it's really starting to resonate since 2020 that, hey, I've got to start thinking, whether that's I'm getting capped on how many shipments I can get out, or my failure rate is up, or I can't reach my clients in a reasonable amount of time, so my customer experience is starting to drop down. So more and more our conversations are starting to say, hey, what do I need to do to get started in diversifying my network? And that's where we really start digging into that conversation. What are you prepared to do? Because there's a number of partnership fulfillment centers that you can start to look at. You can start to look at regional carriers and other carriers that can support your clientele. One of the limitations about regional carriers is you have to be in that region in order for them to handle your shipments. So it's a multi-pronged approach that you need to go through.
Yeah.
So that's where we start having the conversation is, let's look at the data. Let's look at your SKUs. Let's look at your shipments and figure out what type of shipments are going to what region, and get a good understanding of what your business profile is in the varying regions. And then let's start looking at partnerships that we can get those SKUs or those types of product into those regions strategically. And then let's look at multi-carrier solutions to where you're not going to be stuck with your product sitting on a hot dock yet needing to get moved out.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think some of the regional carriers that have really taken off as of lately, On Track, Lasership, Lone Star. It's been interesting to watch, but there looks to be like a consolidation that potentially could happen between regional carriers and combinations that shippers can be able to kind of utilize. But you're totally correct. If you don't have the right product shipping out of the right location that a regional carrier can handle, you need to approach that as well, keeping and storing your product out of a better location to reach customers faster for less money, staying in transit for less time. If you're looking at your top zones, and meaning where you're shipping to in the United States, if your top zones are zones 6, 7, and 8, meaning you're shipping across country and you're shipping sensitive items, limiting and lowering those zones to ship more locally. So if you've got a large customer base in the West Coast, in California, Oregon, Washington, where should you be shipping from in order to be able to reach them faster and keep it off of, to your point, a hot dock for a really long period of time? Regional carriers are a great option, and or tackling it from a ship from location, a distribution location, I think is really helpful. All of that, I would say, is a giant math problem, right? When you look at your data, you kind of have to calculate and identify. How difficult of a problem is that for shippers to solve?
I mean, it's massively difficult. You mentioned the data files. If you look at like a single shipment and the amount of data that can come through it, you mentioned upwards of 60 columns. I've seen upwards of 250 columns for data, especially when you start putting in tracking data and everything that goes along with it. Trying to break down and understand, what SKUs are going into that shipment number, and then ultimately how it's traveling through the network and where it's going. I mean, it's massive, right? Like, I think Excel is limited to a million line items, and if you're shipping, 100,000 plus packages a year, you're going to blow out any sort of Excel file, and it's going to take a long time. And those are the problems that we really pride ourselves on being able to solve, and that's why we've built the systems and the software that we have over here. And it's exciting to go through some of these exercises with our clients and say, hey, you're averaging 1,500 miles with your shipments.
Yeah.
Let's start modeling out some strategic placement of different distribution centers, and let's see how it actually impacts your business. And we're able to see that in real time, how it's going to impact your time in transit, how it's going to impact your total landed cost, so that you can actually make strategic decisions before you actually execute on them, and that it's going to succeed because you've already done the math on it and you've done it very quickly.
Yeah, I love that. I think for a single shipper to figure this out, it's massively difficult because it's a gigantic math problem. And the only way to truly do it accurately is to look at it from package level detail. But when you look at it from the package level detail, to your point, and you're doing it in Excel, you're going to be running into the Excel crash, I'm stuck in Excel hell issue. I think what's cool is that Sifted has already figured this out in a turnkey model that is already pre-built, and just needs to plug in your data for some of those solutions to come out of. We're already solving that for a number of other shippers across the board. What's more is oftentimes we get asked questions about sustainability, and cold chain and sustainability don't tend to go hand in hand, right? You're using a lot of electricity to keep facilities cold. You're keeping a lot of, I would say, packaging and packaging material that ends up in landfills in order to protect that. What are you seeing in terms of sustainability, and what options do shippers have to be more sustainable when they are forced to try to protect the product that they're shipping from spoiling?
So one of the biggest trends that I'm seeing right now is reusable containers. Something that, typically what you think about when you're thinking about, a cold chain shipment, you're thinking of like styrofoam inside of a corrugated fiberboard box, and maybe some dry ice or something that's in there, or a gel pack. Shippers are moving towards being able to get reusable containers that they can send multiple shipments through. Get return labels to have them shipped back, or if there's a reverse logistics process with their partner or their end user, that's even better. But that itself then lends itself to other issues and costs and expenses with the carriers. So you might use like a plastic insulated cooler, but then when you start reading through the service guides, and the carriers will say, hey, if this isn't in a cardboard box, you're going to get charged an extra 10, 15, $20, whatever it
Yep.
might be. So
Yep.
now that's requiring you to use additional materials
Yep.
to contain that cost. You might spend 50 cents on a cardboard box to put a plastic cooler in to move it over to save yourself, 15 or $20. But now you've created another economical impact by using this box.
Yeah, it's really, I think, twofold in how it's approached. I think a lot of shippers are looking at, can I still, can I reduce the size of the boxes that I'm shipping out, number one, and still maintain a really low failure rate on some of those sensitive shipments. So there's a lot of models that shippers will build to say, okay, I know I can get this size box or this size SKU in a lower or smaller box and still maintain proper integrity. And if I can do that, what would that do to save me money? Because the carriers, obviously, to your point, they will bill additional fees wherever they can, and they will do it
That's right.
over and over and over again. If it's not in a cardboard box, you get an additional handling surcharge. If it is oversized, you get an oversized charge. If it is just from a dimensional standpoint, they will charge you for how much space it takes up in the plane or the truck. And reducing
dry
that,
ice. Dry ice has a charge.
Yeah, hazmat. There's a lot of those things that of saying, okay, if I'm going to go into this direction, what can I do to responsibly reduce my cost and responsibly reduce the amount of material that I use? And I think reducing box sizes, I think, is a big component to that. On the last LinkedIn Live show that we did, we had Herc from Smart Warehousing, a CTO from Smart Warehousing. He mentioned that Smart Warehousing, which is a fulfillment organization, they have subterranean warehouses, which I thought was really kind of a cool idea. They're not necessarily utilizing above ground facilities where they have to, pump in massive amounts of electricity and energy to keep those warehouses cool. They're using natural abilities of underground caves, as weird as that sounds, to store and keep their product there. I think there's a lot of really cool ways that shippers can move their product safely in a responsible manner and in a sustainable manner that they can then communicate back to their clients. I think,
That's right.
I bet you've seen that with a lot of customers that they're worried about sustainability because their customers are worried about sustainability.
Yeah, sustainability is a huge topic right now. Energy prices are at record highs. Um, it's a big focus. There's a lot of government initiative pushing clients or different companies to be more efficient and more economical. Even consumers themselves are looking for companies that are as green as possible or as efficient as possible. So this is a very, very hot topic in the transportation industry right now, and how can we be as efficient as possible?
Yeah, hot topic, no pun intended. I thought we were gonna joke about that like the first 5 minutes, but it's the end of the show and we're already talking. We finally just hit a pun. Where can shippers go to learn more about cold chain and being able to be a smarter shipper for making sure that their products are shipped responsibly and have a high number of integrity, low failure rate?
Sure. I would check out our knowledge base that we have here at sifted.com. We've got a lot of different documents out there and white papers that we've put out on the topics. That's a great place to start. And then we're going to start referencing, other areas where they can go and find additional information on how to be a little bit more efficient and manage their cold chain. And any questions that anyone has that's listening out here, obviously don't hesitate to shoot us an email, give us a call. We've got a whole bunch of industry experts here that would love to take your calls and have those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think down below in the chat window, we've got a link for our free cold chain guide that walks through a number of ways that you as a shipper can be able to make smarter decisions when it comes to shipping your sensitive items. Jeremy, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you being on the show with us this month, and I
Yeah,
can't wait to have you back.
yeah. Looking forward to doing this again sometime.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in. Join us next month. In the meantime, feel free to drop us a comment. Reach out to us, as Jeremy said. We'd be happy to show you a demo of the tool as well. There's a lot of cool technology that Sifted is breaking ground on and releasing. So love to show it to anybody, and thanks so much. Enjoy your day.